Yes, it has been a busy morning. As we know, last night Reece Walsh got ruled out due to a hamstring injury. Ronaldo Mulitalo was brought in, but this morning he has been ruled ineligible to play. Now that is because he lived in New Zealand until he was nearly 14 years of age. The rules state you have to live in New South Wales or Queensland before your 13th birthday. Making this even more staggering is the fact that he played for Queensland in the under-18s and the under-20s as well. So Danny, I'll throw this over to you because you spoke to Ronaldo just before we came on air. How was he?
Danica, he's shattered. He's totally confused as to what's happened, why he's in this current situation. He can't understand it. He was of the belief that he was eligible for Queensland. He played 16, 18s and 20s with them. And he's, at his second most recent contract, he said that he was asked where the majority of his football was played. He said that was Queensland, so he felt he was eligible for Queensland. He then ticked the box for Queensland for his next contract as well. Perhaps that's his fault. He admits that could be his fault for not going through the whole process, because it is a complicated one and it is an unclear one. And today the game's embarrassed. It's a farcical situation that a young man finds himself in, that as he's about to achieve a dream, it's yanked away from him. And he's very upset and he's really struggling to understand why rules can be bent for other players. It was bent for Joseph Suwali recently. He feels that it was bent for James Tarmo in the past as well. And his view is, why is he in this situation now? There are a lot of questions, not a lot of answers at this point. Clearly, if it's black and white, he can't play. But the situation has devastated him, and he wants answers. He's a totally confused young bloke, and I think that the game does owe him some answers. I mean, Sterling Gus, you even spoke to him as well, so you guys would have a strong opinion, I imagine.
It's heartbreaking. You can't do this to the young man. Gus, you know the background to this young bloke and the motivation in coming to Australia all those years ago.
Absolutely. Well, my son played junior rep football with him in the Cronulla program, match, flag and ball. Ronaldo was born in New Zealand, was in New Zealand at the age of 13, and as he tells me, there was no rugby league in his school. It's predominantly rugby. The pathways in New Zealand are predominantly rugby. He only took up playing the game at 10 years of age, so he'd only been playing for a short time, but he had a dream to play for the Broncos. And his whole family uprooted themselves and moved from New Zealand to Queensland so he could play for the Broncos, or one day hope to play for the Broncos in Queensland. That was his dream. And they uprooted their whole family, they came to Australia, they went to Ipswich, and he has come through the system. He played Queensland under-16s, Queensland under-18s, Queensland under-20s. No one raises the issues for them. Now on the morning of our biggest showcase game,
unbelievable,
following a chat room discussion on social media last night, suddenly someone becomes aware that he might be 10 months short of when he got here to Australia. The rule is you've got to be in Australia before 13. He got here at 13 and 10 months. But they came here with the express purpose, that young man, because he had a dream to play for the Broncos and he had a dream to play for Queensland. He didn't make the Broncos. He eventually got his opportunity down here at Cronulla, but still the dream to play for the Maroons. And he has played for the Maroons in those three emerging divisions, 16s, 18s and 20s. Why on the morning of the game suddenly it's realised that he cannot play in our showcase game tonight is a disgrace. And who is going to take responsibility for this? Well, Ronaldo's feeling as though he's done something wrong. I don't believe he's done anything wrong.
One of our colleagues here at Nine, Matt Thompson, has said this morning that the origin eligibility, and we know this is a whole other discussion, but it's archaic and exclusionary. Would you agree with those terms? They've
tried to change it a couple of times. And this is the thing that I say. When Origin first came into being in 1980, and we know the reasons it came in, rugby league was an Anglo-Saxon game played in Sydney and Brisbane, wasn't it? That was it.
Absolutely.
That was it. That was our competition, Sydney and Brisbane. Our game is anything but that today. Anything but that. The demographic has changed significantly and our eligibility rules have not changed along the way. We should also be trying to enhance international football, which means we've seen the passion with which the Pacific Island nations play. We had a monumental moment 2 years ago, and because of COVID, we haven't been able to capitalise it, where players elected to play for Tonga and they beat Australia in a test match. That was a monumental moment in that piece. I think that players playing here in Australia who come through the Australian system should be allowed to play Origin football, and then if they elect to play the international with New Zealand or with one of their
Which we
Pacific
hope
Island,
they do.
which we hope they do, which it strengthens international football, it gives us another product. But our eligibility rules just don't cater for that. And to think that over a 10-month discrepancy, no one's trying to cheat the system here. He's already played 16s, 18s and 20s for Queensland, so who allowed that to happen if he was never a hope of playing Origin down the track? The whole thing is just farcical, absolutely farcical. But these eligibility rules have always been ad hoc, done on the run, changed here and there to suit a thing. I can remember years ago we had to qualify blokes that had sort of flown across Brisbane there at one time. But he's going to be replaced tonight by Xavier Coates, who has already played for PNG, and he is now playing for Queensland.
Gus, the other thing he raised with me, he said, what does it mean those junior competitions are worth if he could play in the 18s? If he could play in the 20s for Queensland, he said to me, what does that mean?
Yeah, because of my association now with the Warriors, and I've had 2 trips to New Zealand now, and I'm speaking to people over there in New Zealand all the time, the game of rugby league in New Zealand is dying in a lot of areas because there's no rugby league offering for them. And there's no pathway for the rugby league players in high schools leading into after school. There's no competition for kids leaving school at 18 years of age. These are things we've all got to change. The Warriors have walked away from development and sent their second tier in their 20s to Redcliffe to get them some competition. So had Ronaldo Mulitalo not made the decision to move from New Zealand at 13 years of age, he'd be a rugby player in New Zealand. He'd be a rugby player. He came here to play rugby league, a passion to play with the Broncos in Queensland. He's done everything right, but someone's found that he was 10 months too late 9 years ago.
The other thing was I spoke to James Tedesco also just before we went to air. The New South Wales Rugby League hasn't been told he's out. They know nothing. They don't know that this has happened, basically. They're hearing reports from...
they're all watching the show now. They know.
Well, I hope so. But, I mean, they haven't heard anything official.
No,
I mean, that's pretty bad, isn't it? The team playing against the other team don't get told that this bloke's out. What are we doing?
I think farcical is the right word.
Danica, is there anything official on Xavier Coates?
No, so Queensland Rugby League haven't even...
You've been really good. You've had a great segment.
The Queensland Rugby League haven't come out yet and confirmed it at all, like online or anything. So you can't even begin to imagine what would be going on in the Queensland camp at the moment. You can't help but feel for Ronaldo at the moment as well, as we heard, very emotional from Danny Weidler. So we'll be speaking to Jonathan Thurston a little later in the show. So hopefully he can give us a bit of an insight into what's happening right now inside that Queensland camp, and we'll also be speaking to Peter V'landys as well. He probably can give us also a bit of an insight to see what happens.